I never expected her to remember my name. Not really. I was just someone who stood in her kitchen once or twice a month, shoes by the door, asking if my friend was around. Someone temporary. Someone forgettable. That's what I thought. The first time I noticed her noticing me, we were at the laundromat on Maple, the one with the broken change machine and the dryer that screamed like it was dying. I'd gone because my apartment's washer flooded again, and because the idea of sitting alone with damp clothes felt less heavy than sitting alone with nothing to do. She was already there. I almost didn't recognize her without the house around her. No couch behind her, no framed photos leaning slightly to the left. She was folding towels with the kind of care people use when they're stalling. Slow, exact. Her hair was pulled back, not styled, just contained. She wore a gray sweater that looked older than me. She looked up when I walked in. Didn't smile right away. Just tracked me for a second, like she was lining something up in her head. "You're Adam," she said. Not a question. I nodded. "Yeah. Hi. Hi." She glanced at the washers, then back at me. "Your machine finally give up?" "Still fighting," I said. "I needed a neutral place." She smirked at that. Not big, not friendly, just a corner of her mouth lifting like she wasn't sure if she should. "Neutral places are rare." I laughed, then stopped too quickly, like I'd revealed something by accident. I loaded my clothes into the washer beside hers, careful not to bump her basket. Our hands almost crossed. Didn't. Still, I noticed the space where they could have. We didn't talk much after that. The machines filled the silence for us. I sat on one of the plastic chairs and checked my phone, scrolling past messages I'd already read. One from my friend, days old. A half-written reply I never sent. I folded the corner of a receipt over and over until it stayed bent. Every few minutes, I looked up. She was still folding, still unhurried. At one point, she dropped a sock. It rolled near my shoe. I picked it up and handed it to her. "Thanks," she said. Our fingers brushed this time. She didn't pull away fast. Neither did I. It felt like standing too close to a door you're not sure you're allowed to open. She studied my face, briefly, like she was checking for something. "You're quieter than I remember." "I think I was just louder around other people," I said. "That tracks." She nodded, as if confirming a theory. Then she added, almost absent-mindedly, "You always show up when I least expect it." I didn't know what to do with that. I washed her hands instead. They were steady. No rings. When my washer stopped, I moved my clothes to the dryer. She did the same. We stood there together, waiting for the machines to accept our quarters. The change machine coughed and refused mine. She reached into her pocket without looking. Held out 2 coins. "I've got it," I said. "I know," she replied. "Take them." I did. When it was time to leave, she slung her basket onto her hip and paused at the door. The late afternoon light cut across the floor, catching dust in the air. "Tell him I said hi," she said. "I will." She hesitated, then added, "You don't have to wait for things to break to come by." I nodded. Didn't trust my voice. That night, my phone lit up at 12:47 a.m. A missed call. Her name. The missed call sat there the next morning like a question I wasn't sure I was allowed to answer. I stared at my phone longer than I should have. Checked the timestamp twice. 12:47 a.m. I tried to imagine why she'd call that late. An emergency, an accident, her phone slipping in her hand. I typed, "Hey, everything okay?" and deleted it. Typed, "You called me last night," and deleted that too. By the time I showered, it felt safer to pretend it hadn't happened. I saw her 3 days later. Her house was quieter than usual. No music drifting out. No lights on upstairs. I knocked anyway, mostly because I didn't trust myself not to. When she opened the door, she looked surprised, but not startled. Like she'd already rehearsed seeing me and was just early. "Oh," she said. "Hi." "Hey." I stopped. Reset. I was in the neighborhood. She stepped aside without asking why. The living room smelled like tea and something toasted. A cardigan hung over the arm of the couch like it had been shrugged off mid-thought. "You want some?" she asked, already moving toward the kitchen. "Sure." We stood at the counter while the kettle finished what it was doing. She didn't look at me while she poured, which somehow made the room feel smaller. She slid a mug across the counter. Our fingers didn't touch this time. I noticed that too. Her son's name came up eventually. It always did. She asked if I'd heard from him, if he was still talking about moving, if I thought he'd actually do it this time. I answered carefully, like my words might be used against me later. He's excited, I said, but he gets quiet when things get real. She smiled at that, not amused, recognizing. Yeah, he's always been like that. There was a pause. She folded her hands around her mug. When his dad left, he stopped asking questions. Just figured things out on his own. She glanced at me, then away. I worried about that more than the divorce. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't rush to fill the space. I watched steam rise from my tea, watched it disappear. I'm not great with silence, I said finally. I usually assume I did something wrong. She looked at me then. Really looked. That sounds exhausting. I shrugged. You get used to it. She didn't respond right away. Just nodded, once, like she was filing that away somewhere she'd find later. The risk hovered between us without being named. I was her son's age. I'd sat at this table with him, laughing about things she pretended not to hear. I imagined how it would look, from the outside, from him. The thought tightened something in my chest. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. We lingered there, neither of us reaching for the handle. About the other night, she said quietly. I didn't mean to call. It's okay, I said too quickly. Then, softer, I didn't mind. She smiled at that. A small, careful one. She reached out and straightened the collar of my jacket. An ordinary gesture, almost parental. But her hand stayed there a second longer than it needed to. I'm glad you came by, she said. I nodded, unable to look away. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. After that, I started noticing changes in the house before I noticed them in myself. Lights going off earlier upstairs. Her car gone more often in the evenings. The spare key that used to sit in the ceramic bowl by the door disappeared. None of it dramatic. Just enough to feel like something had been adjusted, quietly, on purpose. I told myself it was normal. People get busy. Lives shift. Still, I found myself slowing on the stairs, listening for her footsteps without admitting that's what I was doing. The next time we were in the same room, it wasn't planned. I was in the backyard, wrestling with the old hose that never coiled right, when the back door opened. She stepped out with a laundry basket balanced against her hip. Stopped when she saw me. Oh, she said. Same word. Different weight. Hey. She hesitated, then came down the steps. Set the basket on the table like it was an excuse to stay. The air smelled like cut grass and detergent. Domestic. Too familiar. You didn't text, she said, then immediately added, not that you need to. I didn't think. I started, then stopped. I wasn't sure. She nodded. Looked past me, toward the fence. That makes two of us. I handed her the end of the hose. Our fingers brushed again. This time, she pulled back first. We stood there, side by side, watering nothing in particular. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable exactly. Just full. My son asked about you, she said. That did it. The small tightening. The reminder. What did you say? That you've been busy. She glanced at me. Which is true. I nodded. Imagined him saying my name. Imagined explaining things I hadn't even figured out yet. She shifted her weight. Folded one corner of a towel over and over against the basket rim. I don't want things to get confusing. For him, I asked. For either of us, she said gently. Not unkind. Careful. Something in me resisted that word. Confusing. As if this hadn't already settled somewhere permanent. I'm not trying to make anything weird, I said. I know. She smiled, but it didn't reach all the way. That's the problem. A car door slammed somewhere nearby. A neighbor's laugh floated over the fence. The world continuing, oblivious. She reached for the basket. I should. I stepped closer without deciding to. Not blocking her. Just there. The space between us thinned until I could smell her shampoo. Something citrus. Clean. She looked up. Froze. For a second, neither of us moved. Her eyes flicked to my mouth. Then away. Then back. I didn't mean to call you that night, she said suddenly. I was tired. I thought. She stopped. Shook her head. It doesn't matter. It kind of does, I said quietly. Her breath caught. Just once. I lifted my hand, not touching her, just hovering near her arm. Waiting for permission that never came, but wasn't refused either. She leaned in a fraction. Or maybe I did. It was hard to tell where the motion started. Then the back door creaked open. Mom, her son's voice called from inside. She stepped back immediately. Like muscle memory. Like practice. Yes, she called, steady already. I dropped my hand. Picked up the hose. Water splashed onto the grass, careless. She didn't look at me again as she went inside. But later, alone in my room, I realized my jacket still smelled like her shampoo, and that she hadn't asked me to give it back. The breaking point didn't arrive loudly. It came the way most things between us did, wearing something ordinary, pretending to be nothing. We ended up walking together because the power went out. Just a neighborhood outage. No storm. No warning. The house went dark mid-sentence while I was returning a book I'd borrowed from her son months ago and never finished. She laughed once, short and surprised, then sighed like she'd been expecting it all day. Fuse box is at the end of the block, she said, grabbing her keys. If you don't mind. I didn't. The street was dim, lit by porch lights and the moon caught between clouds. She walked a step ahead of me, arms folded, cardigan pulled tight. I noticed how careful she was with her pace, like she didn't want to arrive too quickly. Halfway there, we passed the small park, the one with the bench no one ever used because it faced the wrong direction. She slowed. Do you want to sit for a minute? She asked, already turning. My feet are killing me. We sat. Space between us. Not much. Enough to notice. She exhaled slowly, hands resting on her knees. I watched her fingers flex once, then still. I saw you with someone, she said. The words landed cleanly. No accusation. Just fact. Who? I asked, even though I already knew. The girl from the cafe. Last week. She smiled faintly. She seems nice. She is, I said. Then, because silence demanded honesty, it wasn't serious. She nodded. Looked straight ahead. Of course. The jealousy wasn't sharp. It was quieter than that. More like disappointment turned inward. Like she was angry at herself for noticing it all. I don't get to have opinions about that, she said. I know. You can't, I said. Too quickly. She turned to me then. Really turned. Her face was open in a way I hadn't seen before, unguarded, tired. That's the problem, she said softly. I shouldn't want to. The street was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. I resisted the urge to fill it. My son watches everything, she went on. Not obviously. But he always has. A pause. And you're not just anyone. I know, I said. And I'm not, she stopped. Pressed her lips together. Started again. I'm not built for halfway things. Something in her voice loosened something in me. I think about you more than I should, I admitted. The word surprised me by existing. In moments that don't belong to you. Her shoulders dropped a fraction, like she'd been holding them up for weeks. That's not fair, she said. You shouldn't have to carry that. I don't mind, I said. That's the scary part. She laughed once, breathy. Shook her head. You're too young to say things like that like they're already settled. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just know when something feels real. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were wet, but steady. If I let myself lean any closer, she said, almost to herself, I don't know if I'd stop. I shifted, my knee brushing hers. Neither of us moved it away. The fuse box hummed faintly down the street. A porch light flickered back on behind us. She looked at me, searching. What do you think would happen if we did? She didn't answer her own question. And neither did I. She stopped leaving the porch light on. That was the first thing I noticed. Not consciously. Just the way the house looked different when I came home late. Darker, closed in, like it had already decided the day was over without me. I didn't see her for almost 2 weeks. Not on the stairs. Not at the mailbox. Not in the kitchen where she sometimes stood in the mornings, mug warming her hands, pretending not to listen to the radio. I told myself it was coincidence. Schedules shift. People retreat. That's allowed. I stopped finding reasons to pass by. When I did see her car in the driveway, I felt a brief lift, something stupid and hopeful, followed by the reminder that I didn't know if I was welcome to act on it. So I stayed inside. Let the moment pass. The distance felt intentional, careful, like something she'd measured and decided was necessary. One afternoon, I ran into her ex by accident. He was at the house when I got back from work, leaning against his car, talking too loudly. Not angry. Familiar. Comfortable in a way that stung without explanation. He laughed, head thrown back, and I realized with a strange calm that I'd never heard her laugh like that around me. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed. When she saw me, her expression flickered, surprise, then something like apology. She didn't introduce us. Didn't need to. I went inside without being invited to stay. That night, I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling fan, watching the blades blur. I imagined scenarios I didn't want. Reconciliations, history repeating itself, her choosing the known weight over the risky one. I told myself it made sense. I told myself this was how it was supposed to end. I typed a message. Did I do something wrong? Deleted it. Typed another. I miss talking to you. Deleted that too. I wasn't heartbroken. Not exactly. It was quieter than that. Like someone had pressed pause in the middle of something important and walked away. I started coming home later, picking up extra shifts, letting the house feel like a place I passed through instead of lived in. When her porch light came back on one evening, I noticed and didn't go outside. A few days later, I found the book I'd borrowed sitting on the stairs between our doors. No note, just the book, returned without ceremony. I stood there longer than necessary, holding it. I considered knocking, rehearsed the sound my knuckles would make against the door, thought about how she might open it, guarded, tired, relieved, not relieved at all. I didn't knock. I set the book back down, carefully this time, like it might break if handled wrong. That night, my phone buzzed in my hand with her name on it. I didn't answer. The screen dimmed, went dark. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The power went out again the following week. Same quiet click, same sudden dark. I almost laughed at the familiarity of it, like the house had run out of ways to avoid the conversation and decided to intervene. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Finally, I grabbed my jacket and stepped into the hallway. Her door opened at the same time. We stood there, facing each other in the dim light spilling from a neighbor's window. Neither of us smiled. I wasn't sure if you'd come, she said. I wasn't sure if I should, I replied. She nodded, accepting that without argument. Fuse box. Yeah. We walked together, slower than last time. Closer. The air felt heavier, like it knew what was at stake. When we reached the bench by the park, she stopped. I can't keep doing this halfway, she said quietly. I didn't ask what this meant. I knew. I tried to pull back, she went on. I thought if I gave it time, the feeling would, she searched for the word, behave. And did it. She shook her head. It just got quieter. Which was worse? We sat. Our shoulders touched this time. Neither of us moved away. My ex came by because my son asked him to, she said. About money. About school. About things I can't fix on my own. She looked at her hands. It reminded me how complicated my life already is. I don't want to be another complication, I said. She turned to me. You're not. A pause. You're the thing I keep trying not to name. The streetlight flickered back on behind us. Soft yellow. Ordinary. I stopped answering because I was scared, she said. Not of you. Of how easily I started rearranging my days around the idea of you. Something settled in my chest. Not relief, not triumph. Recognition. I almost stopped showing up altogether, I admitted. I thought maybe that was the right thing to do. And was it? I thought about the empty evenings. The book on the stairs. The unsent messages. No, I said. It just made everything else louder. She reached for my hand then. No hesitation. Just a simple, deliberate choice. Her fingers were warm. Steady. If we do this, she said, it won't be simple. I don't need simple, I said. I just need honest. She studied my face, searching for something she could trust. Whatever she found there made her exhale slowly. Okay, she said. Not a promise. Not a declaration. Just a door, finally left open. We didn't tell anyone right away. That felt important. Not secretive, just protected. Like something that needed to exist in its own shape before being named aloud. Life didn't pause for us. Bills still came. The power went out one more time that winter. Her son still forgot to replace the milk. But the space between things changed. Mornings became quieter in a different way. Not empty, shared. Some days I'd come upstairs early, 8:47 on the dot without planning it, and she'd already be in the kitchen, kettle humming, mug warming her hands. She'd pour black coffee for me without asking. tea for herself. We didn't talk much before 9. That became a rule we never discussed. The bench at the park turned into a place we passed, not a destination. We didn't need it anymore. Sometimes we'd glance at it anyway, a small acknowledgement of where things had almost stalled. Her son noticed before we said anything. Not because of how we touched, there wasn't much of that at first, but because of how we listened. How she stopped checking the time when I spoke. How I stayed in rooms I used to excuse myself from. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, he looked between us and said, "So, are you two okay?" She smiled. The real one this time. "Yeah," she said. "We are." That was enough. It wasn't always easy. There were days she pulled back out of habit. Days I wondered if I was borrowing something that would eventually ask to be returned. We talked when it mattered. We stayed quiet when it didn't. Learned the difference slowly. Sometimes, late at night, she'd make tea and sit at the table, cardigan pulled around her, and I'd join her without speaking. Other times, she'd watch me drink my coffee in the morning like it was a small, grounding proof that I was still there. Once, months later, I asked her about the missed call. "Which one?" she said. "The first one." She smiled, folded her hands around her mug. "I couldn't sleep. I thought of you. I hung up before it rang twice. I saw it anyway." "I know," she said. "I was hoping you would." The house never felt neutral again. It felt lived in. Chosen. We kept our routines small. Groceries on Sundays. Shared silences that didn't ask to be filled. Her hand on my arm when she passed behind me in the kitchen, brief, unconscious, real. One morning, I noticed the porch light was still on when the sun came up. I pointed it out. She shrugged. I forgot to turn it off. I didn't correct her. Some things don't need fixing. Some things just need to be left on long enough to be seen.